This episode of Amateur Traveler is sponsored by Cozy Earth, which adds casual elegance to any space, by the Florida Keys Traveler podcast, and by Prismatext that makes learning a language as easy as reading a book. Amateur Traveler, episode 855. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about wineries and gardens, a star fortress and castles, cliffs, and lemon trees as we go to Lake Garda in Italy and the Verona Countryside. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about Lake Garda. I'd like to welcome to the show Valeria Biasi, who is a certified guide for Verona at veronatours.com. And strangely enough, she's come to talk to us about Verona and that region of Italy. Valeria, welcome to the show.
Oh, grazie, Chris. I'm happy to be here.
And I think you probably already established for people that your connection with Verona is you're from there.
Oh, yes. I call myself a very local guide. Born and raised in Verona. And actually, I'm delivering tour since the year 2000. So I call myself also a very seasoned local guide.
Excellent. And why should someone come to Verona?
Oh, Verona is somehow unexpected as a city. I know you covered Verona city already in a couple of your episodes, but in spite of that, Verona is still unexpected. So I would say that the majority of people that I welcome, including this morning, I was giving a tour to guys from, they were from, I think, Daytona Beach in Florida. And they said, we did not expect Verona to be so nice and charming. You know what? We don't have the icons. I always say we don't have the David, okay? We don't have the Dome of St. Peter in Rome,
right.
But we are a very Italian city with all the layers of the history and the geography and the lifestyle, let me say. We are less busy. We don't live on tourism. So as you stroll in our streets, you see a lot of locals. There's a music festival on this very afternoon in Verona city. And it's very lived in. And we don't live on tourism. And so there are tourists, but I think they appreciate these local vibes, let's say.
Okay. And to put it on a map, we're in the Veneto, so in the region near Venice, but we're in the far west part of that region.
Exactly. So you have the boot of Italy, right? We have the boot of Italy. We are in the northern part, in the Po Valley. And at one end, say east, you have Venice, as you mentioned. And in the middle of that northern part, you have Milan. Just in between Venice and Milan, you find Verona. And let me say that because I think we never really make this point. Verona is a great hub. So say from Verona in 1 hour or maximum, 1 hour and a half maximum, you get to Venice, you get to Milan, you get to the Dolomites, you get to Bologna, you get to Modena. I know, these cities you have covered already. It's a food valley of Italy. The Dolomites, obviously, for skiing and hiking. And Milan and Venice, obviously, very important cities. But then from here, you also go to two other areas that I want to cover with you today. One is the wine area called Valpolicella, that is reachable from the city in less than 30 minutes. So it's pretty close. And the second one is Lake Garda, Lago di Garda in Italian. And there you take 30 minutes. So they are really close. And so there could be two good reasons to come to Verona.
Excellent. What kind of itinerary are you going to recommend for us?
So let's say you take a hotel or a Airbnb, whatever, in Verona city, and then you need a car. to go to the Valpolicella, to go to the wine area. Let's say you're a wine connoisseur, or you love wines, or you simply are curious, right? In your party, there's someone that loves wine a lot. That could be a good idea to offer to take a wine tour, a wine day tour. And you can schedule, say, 6 hours, more or less.
Okay.
And you need a car. You can't go there with the public transportation, unfortunately.
Okay. When we're heading north from the Po Valley into a separate north-south running valley near the lake.
Yes, let's say that in between the lake and Verona, there's a river. The river is called Adige, and actually it's the river that crosses, that flows through the city of Verona. And nested in the angle made by the river takes a bend in Verona. It quits going north-south and starts going west-east. Nested in that area north of Verona, you have many valleys. It's 5 valleys. I describe them like the fingers of a hand. Okay, many valleys all parallel to one another. They go from north to south.
Okay.
I also call it a little corner of Tuscany.
Okay.
The landscape is like the rolling hills of Tuscany, more or less, covered with both olive trees and vines. And okay, so you take a driver. I have a company of drivers, and maybe also you can buy a wine day tour from the city of Verona. It could cost around, I don't know, depending on quality. I'm a private guide. I deliver private tours, but there are also small group tours going there that are less expensive, and they could cost around 150 euros and even less. I think you can find for 70 euros per person. Anyway, when I give my tours, I go there with a private driver, and we basically go and drink wine. We go there, you can cover a couple of wineries, say one in the morning.
And do you have a couple favorite wineries in the
I
region?
have many. Let me give you a list, because there are, you imagine, 300 producers. They are family, small businesses, small wineries. And so there are really many. Among my favorites, I cannot not mention Quintarelli. Giuseppe Quintarelli was the prophet of the wine that is produced in this area. It is called Amarone. And so it's not a winery, it's a worship place. Okay. It's a place of worship for wine connoisseurs. And I know them very well. I know the family, I know the 2 boys that are his nephews. Giuseppe Quintarelli passed away a few years ago. And so that is obviously number 1 place you want to go.
Now, you say he was the prophet. Did he bring in a different... So I think of Italian wines and I think of rich, long heritage. Did he change the wine business in the region?
He was a very thoughtful, even religious man. And so he put all his soul and expertise in making this wine that became the noble, recognized wine that is today. And so he's called the prophet, and all the other wineries, they really recognize that Giuseppe Quintarelli was a man worth the fame he has, let's say.
So what did he do differently than people were doing before, I guess is what I'm missing.
It is a complex wine. There are many steps. You dry the grapes, you select the grapes, you pick the grapes, you dry them. And then it's a long aging wine. And so he put such a care, and he was so clever and so attentive and so delicate in his winemaking that he brought this wine to the top 3 wines in Italy, together with the Brunello and the Barolo.
And if he's drying the grapes, is this a sweeter wine then?
Yes, good question. Not really. The story goes that the Amarone was made out of a mistake. That was before Quintarelli. Okay, before Quintarelli, the Amarone
Okay.
was already a thing, if you want.
Okay.
Something like a great but local wine. And so they wanted to make a sweet wine called Recioto. The Romans were producing Recioto in the area already. So imagine 2,000 years of sweet wines here.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy, by mistake, the story goes that he forgot to stop the fermentation. And so all the sugars were actually developed into alcohol. And so it turned out to be a non-sweet but very alcoholic wine. And when this guy tasted the Amarone, he said, "Oh my God, that's very amaro." That means very bitter. So Amarone means the bold, bitter wine, the very dry wine. Okay? And so Quintarelli made out of this wine a very refined wine. He was helped in the process by an American, Robert Parker, a very known wine critic.
Got it.
Then let me go on with my list of wineries. There's a very nice winery that I like to go to because they have a lovely view, a gorgeous view on one of these valleys, the Marano Valley. Their name is Gamba. A gamba is a leg in Italian because they are all very tall. And so they were nicknamed the long-legged. Okay? The tall ones, let's say. And then I like Farina wines. They have renovated their wine cellar, and the hospitality there is exceptional. The girls are super nice. Farina wines in Pedemonte. You're offered top-notch charcuterie and local cheeses there as well.
Okay.
Then let me say, I often go to Fumanelli. They are in an estate located in a very green and quiet position. They even have Roman remains in their estate, you imagine? The remain of a Roman temple. They belong to a noble family of the local aristocracy. And there is a young guy called Federico, and he was very passionate on wine and a great storyteller.
Got it.
Then we have another winery called Zyme, Zyme. The guy, Celestino Gaspari, the winemaker, he was, a disciple of Giuseppe Quintarelli, the guy that we mentioned at the very beginning. But Celestino Gaspari from Zyme, he actually took a very different route. His wines are not traditional and very, let me say, put together or so elegant as Quintarelli's ones. They are bold. The guy makes wines out of 15 grape varietals. So, genius of wine, if you want, and he's really recognized. Keep in mind that none of these wineries I go to is big. It's never the big players. The big players in Verona are in the Amarone wine, very few. I would say they are 5 or 6. And I do suggest to your travelers and your listeners, that they don't go to those wineries because they are so well distributed in the US or in Canada or abroad. Why don't we try a different thing? As you come to here, you make the effort, you spend money. What do you think?
I bow to your superior knowledge here. One question I have is, so if I have my own car, for instance, if I haven't gotten a driver and I'm not going to drink too much, are these places that I can just drop by, or do I need a reservation if I'm going to do a wine tasting?
Oh, grazie. Sì, grazie for the question. It is paramount that you book in advance.
Okay.
This is not Napa Valley style. You might.
That's why I asked.
Yes. So you definitely don't have staff there waiting for you behind the bar. definitely. It's all
Yep.
family-run businesses. They are very happy to welcome you. You will find the experience warm and welcoming because they really talk to you and they really want to
Hmm.
know all about you, Chris from San Jose. Okay. And they share a lot, but then you need to book in advance. They need to know that you're coming.
Okay. Now, if I'm traveling with someone who is not as much of a wine connoisseur, are there other things, or is this day going to be really dedicated to wine tasting?
I would say if you don't love wine or you don't love to learn more about wine, don't go to the
Hmm.
Vicella. It's a nice area, but I wouldn't go there unless you have a
Okay.
specific interest on wine. Obviously, when I take my tours, we don't go from a winery to the other. We might go to a viewpoint,
Right.
we might go to a small hamlet like the church of San Giorgio in Ganna Poltron. It's the most famous little church of this area in a very spectacular and in a nice position with a nice viewpoint. Or you go to gardens, let me say, there is the Giardino di Poiega, and there's the garden of Villa Mosconi Bertani. The garden of Poiega is located in Negrar, while the garden of the Villa Novare is located in Arbizzano. And you can buy tickets online for both of these lovely gardens.
This episode of Amateur Traveler is sponsored by Cozy Earth Bedding. Oprah named this one of her favorite things in 2018 because Cozy Earth's best selling bamboo sheet set is temperature regulating and incredibly soft. The bamboo sheet set comes in 7 different colors and 6 different sizes. Cozy Earth's bedding collection offers a variety of luxury pillows, sheets, blankets, and more. Cozy Earth's linen bedding collection adds casual elegance to any space and captures the fabric's breezy, timeless appeal. Get ahead of your spring cleaning with fresh new bed linens from Cozy Earth, made from luxurious, high-quality fabrics you won't find anywhere else on the market. Cozy Earth provided an exclusive offer to my listeners today, up to 35% off site-wide when you use the code Amateur Traveler. That's 35% off with the code Amateur Traveler. Thanks to Cozy Earth for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
There's another villa called Giona Fagioli. Being a hotel, you can park your car in their hotel car park and take a stroll around the garden if you want. But that's basically it. Okay, the views and a little church and some gardens, but you don't go there if you don't like wine.
You and I talked offline about a 1 week itinerary in the area. So this first day we're going out, we're doing wine tasting, and we're seeing some gardens. Is anything else we want to do that day before we move on in our itinerary?
Oh, yes. If you are very much into wine, I would
Yep.
suggest that you explore a little bit of what we call Valpolicella Extended. So, if you want, we
Okay.
say your traveler has to maybe go in Verona, stay there, say 2 days for exploring the city. 1 day in the Valpolicella Classica that we have just covered. It could
Yep.
be day 2, could be in the Valpolicella Extended. If you look up
Okay.
Soave, it's a walled town at the east of Verona. So while the Valpolicella that we have covered is northwest, the area that I'm now mentioning, it's northeast. And there they make wine as well.
Okay.
And they make both the Amarone wine, but in a different way. And then they do this, they make the Soave wine, which is a white wine. So while the Amarone is a red wine, here they do the white wine as well. So what do you do in the Valpolicella extended area? First of all, it's less constructed, so it's more wild. Okay, it's more green. So
Okay.
first of all, you have fun with the views. And in the valleys, there are many wineries making Amarone wines. I'm going to say a few. Trabucchi is one. Then you have the very master of this area, who is Romano dal Forno, possibly the most expensive Amarone wine you find on the market. And his gorgeous, regal, gigantic winery is located in Illasi. So look it up, Romano dal Forno in Illasi. It's not an area many people go to. So they are happy to have visits and wine tastings, but do not expect a lot of people. It's not a very covered area. Very lovely, though. Very lovely. So let's say that in this east area, apart from Romano del Forno, you can find Trabucchi, Sant'Antonio Winery, a very honest wine in a lovely, stunning location. And Corte Sant'Alda is another. And then there's another small winery that is owned by a girl, actually, and it's called Le Guaite di Noemi. Le Guaite di Noemi, a very small mini boutique winery. And as you spend a day there, you could go to Soave as well. And in Soave, you see this walled town with a castle on top, a nice village. And there is one unmissable experience that you can have. And this is related to wine, but white wine this time. The white wine is called Soave, exactly as the village. And very, let's say, the Giuseppe Quintarelli of the area, the prophet of this white wine, his name was Leonildo Piero Panna. And so the Piero Panna winery is simply fantastic wines and very nice winery. So I do suggest that you spend your second day in between the east of the Valpolicella, so the Valpolicella extended, and the Soave village and Piero Pan winery. And so we have covered 2 days, right?
And then if I want to talk my travel partner into coming along who doesn't like wine, I'd tell them there's a castle in Soave in the walled town.
Exactly. And Soave is a village where people are very proud of where they live. So the locals would talk to you. They would, spend a word with you. They are very laid back. You will like it. You will like them.
Excellent. So I've gotten 2 days in Verona, and we're gonna look at listen to one of the other podcasts in terms of what to do during those days. Or are there things you wanted to suggest for those 2 days?
No, let's say that I leave it. No, I leave it for now. Otherwise, it will be too long. So let's say 2 days in Verona, and call me for inspirations.
One in the Valpolicella, one in the Valpolicella extended, and then where am I going?
Cover the Lake Garda. Lake Garda is a good idea for America. I would say that after COVID, eventually, Americans have discovered Lake Garda. Because before it was totally unknown. And you know why? Because we don't have a George Clooney on Lake Garda.
Everybody's going up to Lake Como, you're saying.
So let's see. What is the difference between Lake Como and Lake Garda? First of all, Lake Garda is larger. It's actually the largest lake in Italy. Then Lake Garda is very blue. The color of the water is very blue because, especially in the south part, the shores are very low. They are not steep and they don't reflect the green of the trees in the water. They really call it the sea that is nested in the Alps. Lake Garda being very popular among the German tourists. As I was a little girl strolling with my girlfriends in the streets of Verona, the only contact I had with tourists, it was Germans from Lake Garda. This was 1980s, 1980s, when I was in, say, middle school or high school. The only tourists in Verona were Germans on Lake Garda. So the Germans have been coming to Lake Garda for ages. So that's why the most German lake of Italy. But now, instead, we have many other travelers that love Lake Garda, like the Dutch or the Brits. People from Scandinavian countries, they love Lake Garda. And lately, some Americans, some Americans and Canadians, especially with Valeria, especially myself.
And with it being a large lake, there are obviously many different towns that I could go to. Where are you going to recommend we go?
Exactly. So listen, I would split the visit of the lake in 2 different days, south of the lake and north of the
Okay.
lake. This makes sense for 2 reasons. The first is that you can access the south of the lake by train, for instance, or by bus. And so
Okay.
you can easily explore that area with public transportation, while the north of the lake, being further away from the city, it is a little more complicated. And so you would need to, say, rent a car or whatever. Second and most important reason is that the south of the lake is different from the north. It's really 2 different environments, 2 different landscapes. So let's start with the south. The
Okay.
south of the lake, as I mentioned, is very open. So you have these beachy vibes, you have these resorts, a lot of campsites for
Mm-hmm.
these very casual kind of travelers. You feel like you are on a beach, on a very beloved riverside of, say, the Adriatic or the Tyrrhenian Sea, whatever. So there you go to enjoy the views, obviously. Imagine the lake as the shape of a pear. Okay, so it's wide and rounded in the south, then it gets much narrower in the north. So the lower part, sandy, very open shores. There is one river coming out from the lake. It's called Mincio, the Mincio River.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go there, you have many possibilities. There are many villages. I
Okay.
would start with, say, Garda. The name is named after Garda, after the village
Yep.
of Garda. Garda is beautiful because it has a lovely gulf. So you go there and you have a peninsula closing the gulf. It's very romantic with the cypress trees and the olive groves. It's very nice. And then you can maybe head to Garda and then take a stroll in Lazise, Ardolino.
And before we move on, you had us in Garda. What are we doing in Garda?
In Garda, you sip an aperitivo and watch. You watch the
Okay.
views of this gulf.
If I say key lime pie, dry tortugas, and the African Queen, and you don't immediately get excited about traveling down to the Florida Keys, then I think the new Florida Keys Traveler podcast series is for you. It celebrates the 200th anniversary of the founding of the Florida Keys, so there's no better time than now to learn and dream about this chain of islands that begins just south of Miami and stretches some 125 miles between the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico. But this show explores more than just travel. There's history, sports fishing, diving, dolphins, turtles, writers, artists, music, and cuisine, including, of course, key lime pie. Each episode of Florida Keys Traveler features at least one Keys resident who reveals a new side to the Conch Republic, such as kayaking to a ghost town on a remote island, meeting the man who wants 1,000,000 grandchildren beneath the sea, discovering treasure, the influences of Bahamian, African American, and Cuban cultures, and literary greats such as Ernest Hemingway and Tennessee Williams. Listen wherever you get your shows, or head to fla-keys.com to find out more and listen there. Links and information are in the show notes and the website too, Florida Keys Traveler Podcast. Subscribe and listen today. And thanks to the Florida Keys Traveler Podcast for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
And then other villages for a short stroll and a walk could be Lazise, that has a lovely dock, Bardolino, that produces a very light wine called as the village, Bardolino. But my two favorite villages on Lake Garda are Peschiera and Sirmione. Peschiera.
I saw a picture and fell in love.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Let's start with Peschiera. Peschiera is where the Mincio River comes out from the lake.
Okay.
And it is basically, it's a stronghold. It has been a stronghold from the Roman times, then in the Middle Ages. In the Renaissance, they made bastions made like a star. So you have all these bastions like a star, like a pentagon. Yeah, exactly.
Star Fortress.
And all the little houses inside that are basically hidden. You don't really see the houses from the outside. And this star-shaped stronghold is also surrounded by the river or the lake. So you really don't know whether that is the water of the lake or the water of the river. Anyway, Peschiera is unexpected because it's really something that still has a very military function. There are many barracks around. For a long time, there was a military jail. You might think, oh my God, I don't want to go there. And instead, it's a very good mix, very interesting mix between a resort and a military place. And they go along in a strange and fantastic way. So when I take my travelers there, I have the chance of speaking a lot about the Risorgimento. While the US was fighting the Civil War, let's say, Italians were fighting their three wars of independence, and many battles happened around Peschiera and in Peschiera even. So I find that Americans are intrigued by the Risorgimento. And also there's an episode about the First World War to be mentioned there. So it's a historical part of my lake tours that I like a lot. It gives a lot of meaning to the visit, let's say. And then, say for visiting Peschiera, you take, say, half an hour from Verona to go from Verona to Peschiera, and then an hour and a half to see Peschiera, and then half an hour to drive to Sirmione. Okay? The bad point about Sirmione, if you drive your own car, is that the parking is very expensive. There's no other way. You have to pay. There's no other way. So it's called Parcheggio Montebaldo. You put your car there and then you go there. The geography is that Sirmione is basically in the middle of the rounded part of the lake, and it's at the tip of a peninsula. It's a narrow peninsula.
Right.
As you drive, you start to see the lake on both sides. And you drive up to the Parcheggio Montebaldo, you drop your car there, and then you walk and you get to Sirmione downtown, let's say, which is basically the very tip of this peninsula. So Sirmione is a peninsula that ends with an island. Okay?
Oh, got it. Okay. Now, I'm seeing pictures of this and falling in love with this particular city, but I'm also picturing that this might not be the best place to go in, say, August.
Oh my God, yes. Please don't go to the lake on a weekend in the summer because you will be stuck. You will be stuck in traffic 100%. Why? Because locals, we love Lake Garda. We sunbath and we love it, and we love the tan and everything and the beach lifestyle. So we do go there every Saturday, every Sunday. So please don't go on the lake on a weekend in the season, the summer season.
So if I am there in July, August, go in the middle of the week, but when is the best time of year for me to be in this region?
I would say April, May, October.
April.
Also September, October. Very nice, very nice. So I would avoid June, July, August, unless you are an amateur of opera music that is on in the summer only, unfortunately.
Okay. So that's because it's for the locals, is really the target audience for that. And so we do it when the locals are celebrating their...
Yes. So listen, let me go back to Sirmione because I have a tip to give it to your listeners. And I really want to say that if you go to Sirmione, take a boat tour. take a boat tour. So if you go to Sirmione, you, at the beginning of the old town, you will see sun umbrellas saying boat tours, and they charge by person. Per person, it could be, I'd say, 30, 40, 50 euros. And they take you around the island. And it's not a tourist trap. It's something that I do every time. It's super wonderful to get the sense of Sirmione from the water. It's not long. It's 40 minutes.
Excellent.
It's worth paying.
And we haven't really described this. The reason I fell in love with it, I said when I saw a picture, is we've got these crenellated walls and a castle and old town. And you mentioned it being a narrow peninsula. I would say it's 1 block wide, maybe a block and a half, a very narrow peninsula, which is why I was thinking in August, this has got to be just a zoo, but it just is gorgeous old town, and a very old town. I understand this is some of the oldest inhabitation in Italy in this region.
Yes. My background is Roman archaeology. And in Sirmione, I'm very happy when I have archaeology lovers, because I can take them to the very tip of the island, meaning the very tip of everything, the tip of the peninsula and the island, the very tip that literally dives into the lake. It's occupied by a massive Roman villa. It's a massive remain of a Roman private villa that was huge, with an olive grove in the middle, like a portico with an olive grove in the middle. It had underground lobbies, I say, for jogging, because it was as long as you can jog up and down. And then it has the usual luxury spa, the spa part of the villa with heated swimming pool. And so it was luxury, top notch. And unfortunately, what is left is only a few remains. But first of all, I love to describe, and I think that my guests, they really like, because you can, with your imagination, you reconstruct a very luxury, high-end Roman place. Second, the views are stunning, because you're there, you have the lake on 3 sides, and when the weather is good, it's a life experience. It's really, you make good memories and good photos. I take good photos of you if you come there with me.
So you mentioned we're going to spend half our time down here in the southern part of the lake, and it seems like you've hit a lot of the highlights. Is there more you want to do in the south before we hit the northern?
If you have an additional day, let's say, you can drive further than Sirmione, and you can take a day ticket to go to Isola del Garda. No, it's a private island with a villa on it. And it's a very magical place, Isola del Garda. You can buy your tickets online, and there are day trips with a boat that takes you there, and the price is per person, and they charge 70 euros or something. And it's a very nice place. Definitely, I suggest when I have time, I go there. But you need to drive a little further, because they have the boats. They leave from Desenzano, Sirmione also. So Isola del Garda is a suggestion for the south of the lake.
Okay. And it looks like a Renaissance palace.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Amazing that it belongs to one family, the Borghese family.
If I had to guess whose palace it would be.
Their name is on St. Peter's facade in Rome.
That would have been my guess.
Their name is only on St. Peter's facade in the Vatican.
It would have been that, or it would have been the Medici or something like that. Yes. But got it. Interesting. Excellent. Then you also mentioned we should go to the northern part of the lake, which is quite different.
Okay, so a dramatic change of setting. Okay, you go to the north of the lake, and remember the top of the pier. So it's like a Norwegian fjord. I have never been to Norway, unfortunately. But I have talked to people that were there, and they told me, yes, you can compare the northern Lake Garda to a Norwegian fjord only in the summer, not in the winter, because there's no snow, right? There's no snow, never on the lake,
Okay.
never on the lake, because this big amount of water makes so that even when it snows in Verona city, it never snows on the lake.
And I didn't realize that the lake is only at
Yes.
200 feet of elevation. We've got these tall mountains around it, so I just mentally put it higher up. So I was
Yes.
assuming snow.
So you go there,
Interesting.
you see this very narrow tongue of water, and there, obviously, the shores are more steep. There are a few rocks with a castle on top, as you imagine. So there are castles, several. We will mention one in particular. And especially on the east, there's the Monte Baldo, which is the tallest mountain in the area, where it snows. It snows every year. Every year you have snow on Monte Baldo. So not only
Okay.
the landscape is very different, but the campsites, they disappear because there's no space, basically. All is very steep, very steep and very narrow. The beaches, they basically don't exist. So why do you go there apart from the gorgeous views? You go there for sports. There are constant winds there. So
Okay.
there's a lot of sailing, kite surfing, wind surfing. It's a very active part
Okay.
of the lake.
This episode of Amateur Traveler is sponsored by Prisma Text. You want to learn a foreign language because you know it will make your travel better, but it's too hard. Prisma Text gives you a different way to effortlessly learn a language. You read a story, you learn a language. When you go to prismatext.com, you can download a book and then choose how many of the words in the book are translated into the language you're trying to learn. So as you're reading, say, Agatha Christie, you get more and more Spanish words included in until you find yourself learning Spanish without even thinking about it. They have more than 400 different vocabulary words per book, and Prismatext has found that it's 50% more effective than traditional language acquisition methods. You can choose from one of 16 different languages. Want to learn French while reading biographies, or maybe German with your favorite sci-fi book? It's up to you. Instead of setting aside time to study a language, instead you can practice just by doing what you want to do, reading your favorite book. To learn more, visit prismatext.com and select from hundreds of titles to start learning a language from your favorite stories. To save 20% off your first order, you can use the code AMATEUR, AMATEUR. And thanks to Prismatext for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
You go there early in the morning, you see all these people doing many things. There's scuba diving, because there the lake is very deep. Scuba diving. Every other year there is a world championship of cliff diving, because
diving.
the shores
Got it.
are very steep and the water is very deep, very close to the shore. And so they do cliff diving there. And then on the mountains, on the Monte Baldo, you can do mountain bike with a view. And what a view! Okay, so there's a lot of sports.
Got it. Now, you haven't told us a specific place we ought to go yet.
Yes. So I would suggest Malcesine. Malcesine.
Okay. So in the middle, on the west,
On the eastern shore of the lake, you go to Malcesine, because there's a lovely castle. By the way, if you want to get married in Italy, that's also the Castle of Simeone is also a venue for weddings. In case you never know, Chris.
Okay.
You never know who's listening.
41 years, I think we'll stick with the current weddings.
Someone that is listening, that needs this information. Anyway, the Malcesine Castle is very beautiful. Wolfgang Goethe was there. I call him the very first German tourist that came to Verona. and the town of Malcesine in itself is very enjoyable. It's, yes, touristy, but not spoiled by tourism. There are many locals living there. And From Malcesine, you can take the cableway. Cableway that takes you on top
Okay.
of Monte Baldo, remember? That there's a mountain there. Oh, yes. So
Ah, okay.
Malcesine is there in between
Yep.
the lake and the mountain. The lake and the mountain. And
Okay. And you say in between the lake and the mountain in the 12 feet that is flat.
so yeah, you take the cableway and you can have a nice lunch. Maybe on top could be you go in the morning. You drive to Malcesine. You take 1 hour from Verona city. You take a stroll in Malcesine.
Okay.
You might take the cableway, and then you have a lunch on top. And then you come down at your ease. Or another idea that I want to leave to your listeners, it is that you can take a boat, a ferry. They put a new ferry from Malcesine to Limone. Limone is a nice town in front of Malcesine. Make a guess what Limone means in Italian. Limone.
I was going with lemon, so.
Yes, it's lemon. So you understand that Limone is where there are many lemon trees. And since we are in north
Oh,
of
okay.
Italy, you don't expect agrooms, right? You don't expect lemon trees.
I did not.
Exactly.
I was assuming the name
But
came
the
from something else.
the Franciscan friars during the Renaissance, they thought of putting lemon trees in pots and to put them in glass houses during the winter.
Ah.
And so they introduced the lemon growing on Lake Garda. That was in the Renaissance, so many centuries ago.
And I was surprised when you say there's so many lemon trees because I'm looking at a picture of Limona sul Garda, and there are maybe 4 buildings and then cliffs behind it.
Yes, yes. But attached to the cliffs, you have these lemon glass houses that are put down in the summer, but put up in the
Interesting.
winter. So maybe you cannot
Okay.
see from the picture, but there are a few left, of course, a few left.
Interesting. And you talked about this being fjord, and this is one of those views that I think you're talking about here, where it literally, this big granite wall of rock comes right out of the lake and
Like a
just
cliff. Yes,
goes up
yes.
and up and up and up.
Yes, exactly. There was also some rock climbing there.
I would think so, yes.
Yes, this is also another additional sport that you want to do there. And that's it. That's it. I think that then you might consider another, the afternoon, say the afternoon in Riva or Torbole, one of the two. Nice villages, very active, nice cafes, lakeside. And Riva specifically has a castle, which was built in the Middle Ages exactly as the Malcesine castle. And I would say that's basically it. So you have the south and you have the north, and you have 2 nice days. And it varies. It's not always the lake, it's 2 different lakes, let's say.
Okay. Excellent. So we've done a couple days of wine tasting. We've done a couple days exploring some of the history and the beautiful sights of the lake. Anything else you want to suggest while we're in this region before we wrap up this itinerary?
Well, I don't think, no, I think we covered a lot. And if you want to write to me, I'm happy to help, super happy to help. And again, do not go on the lake on a weekend in the summer because that's a kind of a suicide. And then wine. Maybe I want to say something about wine. You mentioned you might have someone not liking wine in your party. Wine is, I'm a level 1 sommelier. And I'm in the process of learning more on wine. And I would say, give it a try. Give it a try. It's a nice adventure. We could be playful with wine. We don't want to be too much into it. We want to enjoy. So give it a try.
Okay. As we get to our wrap up questions here, you're standing in the prettiest spot in Lake Garda or in the Verona region. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
I am standing at the Trifora del Paradiso, the window of paradise. That is a broken window of the Roman remains in Sirmione. In the good days, you have the blue waters of the lake and the Monte Baldo in the distance.
Okay.
It's amazing.
Excellent. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in the region of Verona, only in Lake Garda.
Only in Lake Garda? Oh, the boat captains that take you around the peninsula of Sirmione, they are characters.
Yep.
I have fun. They are all of them. I know them very well, and they make me laugh. They make my day.
Excellent. And if you had to summarize the region in just 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Unexpected, cheerful, and
Cheerful, okay. It's all the wine, isn't it?
so let's say unexpected is the city. Cheerful is the wine, because in my experience, wine tours are the easiest, because after the first glass of wine, everybody is extremely happy. And Lake Garda,
I get that.
let me say poetical.
Poetical, okay. Excellent. Our guest again has been Valeria Biasi. Again, a certified guide for Verona. We didn't talk as much about Verona, but you can find her at veronatours.com. And Valeria, if we were looking for a post or more information about the destinations you talked about, are there posts we can look at veronatours.com, or should we just contact you with the contact info there?
Listen, I say we because Verona Tours is 2 guides, actually, myself and my friend Lorella. We have many tours published. You can look up the different tours and obviously take the ideas of tours from our itineraries. And also we have a blog. So you can look at the blog of veronatours.com and you will find some posts on the lake and some posts on the wine area, together with other posts of general interest on the area and also on the city itself.
Excellent. I'll put a link to the blog in the show notes so people can find it more easily. Thank you so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your obvious love for your region of Verona.
Yes, grazie, Chris. That was a pleasure.
A special thanks go out to the patrons of the show who help support Amateur Traveler with their donations as little as $5 a month. They get an ad-free version of the show, a monthly Zoom call, and they get the episode early. And special thanks to Pat McKenzie, who's the latest patron of the show. Thanks, Pat. If you want to learn more, go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. On the recent show on Armenia, I heard from Rob, who said, I visited Armenia in 2017 and really enjoyed it. I happened to be there for Vardavar, and it was one of the funniest days I can remember. You had fire engines just spraying you down with their hoses. It was chaotic, and you obviously have to wear clothes. You don't mind getting wet, as in people will drop water from balconies, etc., but it's a blast. Thanks, Rob. Then I also heard from former guest and patron Jeff Ulfs, who wrote about episode 801. Jeff's going back in the archives to the Tennessee road trip. I wanted to add a suggestion to this episode. I just drove from Nashville to Chattanooga. Halfway between the 2 cities is Manchester. If you need a place to stay, I'd like to suggest LX Hotel, a small, clean, family-run hotel. Upon checking in, you are offered a complimentary beer, at least 4 choices, which they will refresh throughout your stay. The owners had exceptional customer service. Your room rate includes a personally tailored breakfast for the time you'd like to eat. You can have a wonderful dinner across the street at Kubo Grill, an Asian fusion restaurant. Jeff. Thanks, Jeff. And then I would like to say, in terms of Amateur Traveler trips, there are still openings for the second Morocco trip in April of next year. That's the one that I'll only be on the first few days of versus the first trip. But the first trip has filled up. If you're interested in that, go to amateurtraveler.com/trips. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more true.